Good morning, afternoon, evening, whenever it is you're watching this, students. This is Mr. Ramirez once again. I am here to teach you about similes and metaphors. But because we've covered similes and metaphors so much and so often and through so many grade levels, this really is a quick lesson. But we'll see to make sure, we will want to make sure that you get a really good idea or have a really good idea about similes, metaphors, and how to use them. So one of the assignments is to use similes and metaphors in a story, but we'll get to assignments at the end. For right now, we just want to make sure that we understand similes and metaphors. So similes and metaphors, presentation. I have to always move myself. Oh, no, I didn't have to move myself this time. All right. And that's all right. We want to start with one. All right, similes and metaphors. California State Standard, Common Core Standard 5.A. Interpret figurative language, including similes and metaphors in context. Why do we use similes and metaphors? All figurative language, all the figurative language that we've been covering is used to engage readers, is used to make the author's words sound better. It's used to make you read something and it becomes much more interesting. If I simply say, the robot ran toward me, that's not as active, it's not as engaging, it's not as interesting as if we say, the robot stormed at me as if it were 15 Roman soldiers. Or the robot moved so quickly at me, it was like it was lightning in a bottle, right? These things are just way more engaging, and they make you, in your mind, see the movie in your mind with the much more active, much more action in the story. So we always like to use what we call figurative language, and every author will. We read Tuck Everlasting, which had huge amounts of figurative language. It's what makes the book so engaging. So similes and metaphors, they compare, but they compare two things that are not the same, two unlike things. Similes use like or as an indicator, so you know you're comparing two things. When you say, this is like that, or this is as this, right? It's just it's two words that we use, like or as, in order to make this comparison. We call them similes. If you make the same comparison without using like or as, we call it a metaphor, right? Compare two unlike things with no like or as used to indicate anything. You're saying this is that. When you say he is an ox, you're not calling this person an ox, an animal. What you're saying is they're very strong. And it, again, is just very engaging, and it allows your mind to really imagine how strong this person is. If you say he is as strong as an ox, then you're using a simile, and its simile is the same comparison. It's just one uses like or as. He's as strong as an ox. The other says he is an ox, to show us how strong he is. So if we back up and you pause, so let's pause again. Let me pause. Okay. You can go ahead and make sure you open or have open this similes and metaphors worksheets in Google Docs. Ask you, what is a simile? It says, give an example. You should not be using my examples. Remember, I don't like when people steal my examples. You should use your own example. Just think of one. I'm sure you have plenty in your head. Think of a metaphor, right? Definition of a metaphor. And then these other questions, one will ask, why do we use figurative language such as similes and metaphors? And then you have a quiz. And then, like I said, the last part of it is you're going to write a short story. Okay, but so the document is there for you to use. I would suggest you write on a separate sheet of paper for now, just to have it, and then you can transfer it over to your Google Doc. All right. So examples of similes with their literal meanings. Remember, literal is when something actually is or happens. We're using figurative language. So we say, I'm as hungry as a hippo. All you're saying is, I am very hungry. That's the literal meaning. You're literally saying that in a figurative way, in a very nice, poetic, much more descriptive way. My mother is as angry as a hornet. It sounds way better than saying my mother's very upset. My mother's very upset is just a very nonchalant sentence. But when you say my mother is as angry as a hornet, in my mind, I can imagine how angry your mother is. Her house is as big as the White House. All right, she has a very big home. Again, this right here, if you had a whole book of just literal sentences and just literal descriptions, you would not be engaged with the book. It would just be very boring, right? So the metaphor has a literal meaning, and every single sentence has a literal meaning. Examples of metaphors with their literal meanings. Okay, the metaphor, my children are the light of my life. Way better than just saying, my children are very important to me. She is lightning on the court. She's very fast on the court. Why would I read a book who just describes everything in this literal way? I would be way more, it would be way more descriptive, and my mind would really catch on to the metaphors and the similes when they're used. If you say something like this, she is lightning on the court. The judge is the hammer in this town. Well, the judge brings punishment. But it's just way nicer, just way more engaging to say the judge is the hammer. Because now in your mind, you think of a hammer and you know how much damage a hammer can do. Okay, again, that's the metaphor. This here is the literal meaning. Pause if you need to, go to the Google document, see if you really understand this. But, you should be able to understand the difference between similes and metaphors. One uses like or as similes, one does not, metaphors. And you're just comparing two things that are not the same, two different, way different things. Some people say apples to oranges. So look at the two things being compared. And what I do is I just think of what way is the simile or the metaphor being used, right? There's a typo here, it should be a slash. What does one thing mean to another? So how is it that this word is comparing to this other word? When I say your mother is as angry as a hornet, then you're thinking of a hornet and you're thinking of your mother, which, yeah, I know that sounds funny. We're not trying to be funny. You think of those two different things, way different things, and in your mind you can see, oh, I understand. A hornet is a very, mean little animal or insect, right? Way more mean than a bee. What does it mean? What does it actually mean? What is it being said? If I say her house is as big as the White House, oh, I mean, the White House is really nice. The White House is very large. So it must be talking about the size of the home. What does it do? What does a hornet do? Right? What does a hammer do? Right? What does that one thing mean to the other thing? What does it do? Why is the author saying this? Why would they be trying to say something in a specific way? Those are questions that you can ask that help you to focus on what the metaphor or the simile or any figurative language is trying to say. So very important, let me move myself here to the other side. All figurative language has a literal meaning to it. It's trying to say something. It all means something, you just have to figure it out. Maybe that's where figurative language comes from, right? We got to figure it out. Think about all of the lessons that we've had on figurative language thus far. And we really have to think about what the author is saying. We really have to understand what's being said to understand the meaning of that language. When we personify something, we have to understand what the author is trying to say, or else it doesn't mean anything to us. Lost my pointer. So you have a quiz. Oh, I know you're excited. You can go ahead and pause right here at this moment. Get your Google document open if you like, or you can just on a separate sheet of paper, go ahead and answer these questions. All you're telling me is the example shown a simile or a metaphor. You're gonna write your answers on the Google Doc, just record them somewhere, but record how many you get correct on the Google document in order to, make sure that you understand what you're doing here, right? Understand that you get it correct or that you understand what we're talking about. All right, here we go. There's, I think, about 100 questions. I'm just kidding. All right, let's go ahead and let's see question number 1. Question number 1. My hunger is a pack of coyotes on the hunt. Is it a simile or a metaphor? That's all you're answering, simile or metaphor. Go ahead and write your answer on the Google Doc or a separate sheet of paper to record later onto the Google document. Is it a simile or metaphor? Don't cheat, right? There's no need to cheat. There's no need to do any of that. We're just checking. You always want to know if you understand what we're talking about. All right. Question 2. I'm as hungry as 10 coyotes. Maybe I was a little hungry. Maybe I wrote this around lunchtime or something, right? I'm talking about coyotes and hunger. Is that a simile or a metaphor? Right? Write your answer on Google Doc or separate sheet of paper. All right. So all you're saying, is this a simile or is this a metaphor? All right. This part here is cut off from now on, but just know simile or metaphor. That's all you're answering. Okay. Question 3. The children were roses grown in concrete gardens, beautiful and forlorn. Is this simile or metaphor? All right, go ahead and write simile metaphor for your answer for quiz question 3. Quiz question 4. That would have been a disaster so immense that this old weary earth would have trembled on its axis like a beetle on a pin. That's taken from some of ours favorite novel. I don't think I said that correctly. Tuck Everlasting. That would have been a disaster so immense that this old weary earth would have trembled on its axis like a beetle on a pin. Right? And the last question, question 5. Closing the gates of her oldest fears, which is also a quote from Tuck Everlasting. So go and answer quiz question 5. Simile or metaphor? Right? Just go ahead and answer those 5, and I'll be sitting here waiting for you to then look at the answer key. You can pause if you wanted to. Answer key. Question 1 was a metaphor. Question 1 was a metaphor because it simply said it is a pack of coyotes. Right? Go back and look if you need to. It doesn't say like or as. Question 2 does say as. I'm as hungry as 10 coyotes. Question 3, metaphor. Concrete, or roses from the concrete, sorry. Roses grown in concrete gardens. Does not say like or as. Question 4, like a beetle. So it's a simile. And question 5 is a metaphor because it just says closes the gate on her fears. It's saying that she just no longer fears what was out there. Literally is what it's meaning, but they say it in such a nice way, right? Natalie Babbitt, the author of Tuck Everlasting, always used great language, great figurative language in all of her books. All right, so that concludes your lesson today on similes and metaphors. I hope you did well on your quiz. Hope you got 100%. If you did not, go back, double check to make sure you understand the meanings of similes and metaphors. So have a great day. Thank you for sitting through our lesson, and we will see you around on Google Classroom. Have a great day.